Yay. I'm going to clap hands for myself too, because when I was listening to the keynote, I was saying I was on track. This is exactly what we needed. And that part of what she was talking about is what inspired this session. Hopefully today we will be able to remember a little bit of those promises that we made, but also learn some tips of how we can make our club meetings and ourselves more accountable for providing that beautiful experience that Toastmasters should enjoy in every meeting, but also our guests. And that's the heart of this meeting. And I would like to quote our founder of Toastmasters, Mr. Smedley, and saying we learn best in moments of enjoyment. And I want to hold that thought for a second. And I want you to think about your meetings and your experience as a Toastmaster and how many of those are truly of enjoyment. For me, in my clubs, typically they are. Sometimes when I have to visit other clubs, not always I see that enjoyment. And it's so important that we keep our clubs really, really a place that is safe, psychologically speaking, that is welcoming, and that really has those protocols in place that make that experience amazing. Now, I would like to have a little bit of an exchange with you, so I'm not the only one speaking. And my question to you is why Toastmaster etiquette is important. In other words, why are you here today? And you can use the chat or raise your hand. There's not too many of us. I would take it in any way you want to give it to me.
I can answer as well. I can help you out here.
Yes, I think absolutely.
As a fairly new Toastmaster, 3 to 4 years, and being that I'm virtual experience only, and I don't have that experience of in person, the traditional Toastmasters, I think it's important for incoming Toastmasters, new Toastmasters, to really understand that in leadership and in communication, etiquette is also important. And we have to learn those skills as well. It's not just speaking, and it's not just leading, and it's not just communicating.
It's almost like the rule of engagements, right? It's almost like the etiquette at the table. And Nora, I'm looking at you and you're ready to say something. Unmute yourself and give me something. Why do you think this topic is important?
I think the etiquette helps us to show our values, the 4 values of Toastmasters. If we don't have, how can I say, if we don't have the courtesy, the respect and everything, and also to know the moments of truth, then we are doing the same thing that the other people knows in other scenes, and scenarios.
Absolutely. And definitely, I would like to say is what keeps the meetings and the environment that you're co-creating, one that the meeting can flow, that you can really enjoy, because like you said, it will portray those values as Toastmaster. We call it the RISE: respect, integrity, service, and excellence. Okay, definitely it does help us to foster a respectful environment. It promotes effective communication and ensure the smooth flow of the meeting. And that's very key, because when the meetings are a little bit bumpy, you don't have that much of enjoyment. There has been time when I have visited clubs and I'm not so sure what's going on, and because the agendas obviously are different. Every club has their own culture, but if they don't explain very well how they are doing it and in what order they're doing it, or you see people with tensions among each other, you really don't enjoy those meetings as much. So the flow is not as good. For today's subtopics, what I'm planning to discuss is what do we need to do before the meeting? Is there such a thing as a dress code these days or not? During the meeting, what are expected to be done? What is the lectern etiquette? And notice that I said the lectern and not the podium, right? It's a big difference. Virtual meeting etiquette, because these days, some of us are online only or hybrid, and we really need to understand how do we accommodate those protocols that we used to have in person and make the audience online feel almost like they are in live in our meeting, right? In person. They're alive because they're there, right? And then what do we need to do after the meeting? When the meeting is adjourned, what happens? And what etiquette should I have there as well? And I will start with before the meeting. And there's another quote, you see some quotes. I love the quotes for Mr. Smedley. The unprepared speaker has the right to be afraid. Normally, public speaking is already scary for some people, but if you are unprepared, it's even more scary. So I would like to say that one of the things of good etiquette is to be prepared for your meeting, and preparation is key. First, making sure that we are marking our attendance if you're using FreeToast Host or Easy Speak, whatever system that you're saying, make sure that you say, I will be in the meeting. And if it's normal for you to be in the meeting, then if you're not going to be, please let people know. This past Saturday, I have an experience in which I had to cover for someone, and I did not know that that person wasn't going to be there. And thank God, I'm always prepared just in case. But it would be important, especially if you are in an officer role. Then before the meeting, always be familiarized with your agenda. If you're on FreeToast Host or Easy Speak, you have that agenda in advance. Most clubs, they send the agenda in advance. I belong to another club in another district, and one good practice that they have is that they send us the agenda, and the evaluators always call the speakers. The Toastmaster call every single role and make sure everybody is confirmed. So it doesn't overtax the VPE. The Toastmaster take the role for that particular meeting. And I believe that's a great practice. It's a very good practice. And obviously, preparation is the key. Even when you're going to be doing grammarian or you're going to be doing timer, making sure that you're familiar with what is in the agenda. Like on Saturday, I delivered 18 to 22 minutes. That's not typical in a meeting. Obviously, if you're not familiarized with that and you have to do the timer, it can be a little bit confusing if you give me the green light at 5 minutes, right? Make sure that you also are prepared for your speech if applicable. And always arrive a little bit early, even if it's online. I always advise that the online meetings start at least 5 to 10 minutes before, open the door so people get ready on screen and the meetings can start on time. And then what about the dress code? If we are meeting in person or even online, just because we had this joke that you can use your pajama buttons, but make sure that you are okay from the waist up. As long as you don't have an emergency, I had to start running and then they see your pajama buttons, right? So make sure you're dressed properly. Now, sometimes people say, well, what is appropriate? And I would like to say, you are a professional and you're getting ready to be a professional speaker as well as a leader. And ask yourself, how should I be dressing? What will be the appropriate? And it depends on the culture of the club, right? Now, sometimes you might be going to the beach for a club meeting in front of the beach, and that day, guess what? Everybody agreed we're going in short pants, okay? we're gonna go visit Nora in the Bahamas in her background. Obviously, you're not going to be with a suit and tie. There is a club downtown Orlando that they are required to use tie and a coat. Now, in the old days, the dress code was a little bit tighter, and now it's a little bit more relaxed. But no matter what, you need to be neat, clean, and respectful. My rule of thumb on that is, if you're asking yourself, is this okay to go to the meeting? Do you think it's fine? Don't wear it. Once you start asking yourself if you have any doubt, the answer is change your clothes, because probably it's not. And avoid those overly casual, unless otherwise specified, right? Now, this is not the fun part. The fun part is during the meeting. And I'm gonna ask Judy. Judy, can you read our quote from Mr. Smedley here, please?
It says, learning to give a speech is important, but also equally so is learning to listen critically, analytically, and then to give the speaker the benefit.
Very good. There's very key elements in here that are important to etiquette. One is that we need to listen. And in this case, they say listen critically, analytically. And for that, you have to pay attention. You have to be prepared in a meeting to listen as you are prepared to speak. But also the way we give that feedback is also important to do it with certain level of etiquette. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Our job is to co-create a memorable experience for ourselves and for others in the club. So first, we should greet all guests and members, but guess what? If you're getting late, you might not have that time. If you're coming in like 3 minutes after and they are just still doing the Pledge of Allegiance, you don't have time to start hugging and kissing. Like in my clubs, everybody hugs and kisses. Thank God this pandemic is over. You won't have that time to greet anybody, right? But it's important that we treat guests and members the same way. We tend to treat better the guest than we tend to treat our own members. It should not be a difference on that. Normally, it's important to have a guest partnered with a member. Now, somebody might ask, Edith, how do we do that in an online environment or hybrid environment? And normally, what some clubs are doing that I belong to is making sure we have 2 or 3 people who are in charge of those guests. And if it's online, they're chatting and they're asking for their telephone, their emails, and they're sending a welcome package online. So make sure you have those online packages because it's a way of attracting your new members. And the other thing is because on that way, before I forget, in that way, a new member, when you're sitting next to a new member a guest with a member, a guest with a member, then if the person is doubting, how do I vote? How do I use those love notes, we call it the feedback notes, or what is going on in the agenda, the person next can explain what's going on. And the guest will feel a little bit more comfortable knowing what's going on. If the guests arrive in time, maybe the person receiving the individual can explain a little bit about the meeting. But if it just gets there right on time, make sure a member sits next to the guest. Is that clear enough? Okay. Now, we need to bring our best attitude to our meetings. And not because you have a bad day, everybody in your club has to pay for it, right? We are a role model. No matter what's going on in your life, when you are inside your club, people are looking at you as a role model, especially if you are a more senior Toastmaster, a more experienced Toastmaster. Especially those new Toastmasters, they're looking at some of us, after you're 2 years Toastmasters, Now you're not a new Toastmaster anymore. Like I used to say, well, I'm a new Toastmasters. And then just the other day, I realized I'm being Toastmaster 5 years now. I cannot say that anymore. Time up, right? People are looking at you as the role model. And as they reminded us, we made a commitment, we made that promises of how we will be behaving in a way that we're always at the service of others. So make sure that you bring your best attitude. Now, we also have to remember that every club is a community where every member is important. And I really dislike seeing clubs that at times what we have is a group of people who have the dominion of the club and the other people don't have a voice. That cannot happen because the club will be destroyed. And you say, Edith, that sounds like a little bit negative. I am talking the truth and the honest truth here because it's what we need to hear. We need to hear that everybody's voice in a club is valuable and is important for the health of the club. And sometimes we take sides, there's fragmentations in the club, and that's not a sign of health. And it's not part of our etiquette either, right? And we need to also ensure that there's proper setting. Sometimes people are meeting in restaurants, in the lobby of a hotel, etc. No matter where you meet, because some of us are facing challenges in meeting places these days. No matter where we are, we need to ensure the best setting possible, especially if we need to accommodate those hybrid environments, right? Make sure that your lectern is in front and you have somehow the speaker can see the audience that is online in front of them. The other day I had to do a speech in a club that I was invited, and all the online audience was behind me. And I have a camera, they can see me very nicely, but I couldn't see any of the people that were online. Well, guess what? They might feel like I'm looking at them, but definitely I wasn't looking at them because I didn't have them in front of me. And that was not a good experience for the speaker in this case, okay? So make sure you always have your audience in front. In that way, you had that feeling that they're one audience, not two different audiences, okay? It's challenging enough to be talking to a camera. Imagine not seeing the people in the screen either, okay? Very good. And maybe one of DJ's favorite here, accommodate individuals with disability. If you notice, I have the club's caption in this presentation because I don't know on the video who's going to be watching this that needs to be reading instead of just listening, right? We always have to be prepared to participate actively. Of course, we had to silence the device, but if possible, and if you don't need it to time or whatever, make sure you put it away, okay? And by devices, I don't mean just the telephone. I mean the computers, the tablets, etc., because they also make noises. And when I say be present mentally and physically, what do you think I mean? Julie, tell me more about be present mentally and physically. What do you think I mean by that?
One of the things that can take your attention away from the meeting is if you have a role in the meeting and you are not concentrating on what's going on, you're actually concentrating on what you're going to be saying. Practicing your speech in your head, for instance.
When you didn't prepare enough for your presentation and you're doing your speech at the last minute.
Yes, and I will admit I have been guilty of that one.
Yes, I have been too, by the way. While preparing for this presentation, Julie, I had to hold myself accountable because DJ is with me in one of my clubs, and she knows that just recently I was evaluating the wrong person because I didn't pay attention I mean, I was paying attention to both speakers, thankfully, because when I was going to do my evaluation, said, no, you're not evaluating so-and-so, you're evaluating the other one. If I was not paying attention, guess what happened? I would not be prepared to deliver that evaluation. I was able to evaluate that individual, even though I literally evaluated another individual just because I was paying attention. That's the value of that. And she knows I had done it twice. So DJ, I'd done that twice. In a row, by the way, a little bit of distraction there. So yes, mentally and physically, you cannot be there thinking about something else. You have to be in it, be fully present. Now, we need to listen when others are speaking. And one of the things that had happened lately is that I remember when we were meeting just in person, you never leave the room if somebody was speaking. You remember that, Judy? Now we turn on and off the camera when the person is speaking, and you don't know how distracting that is for the speakers. Imagine you're doing the speech and somebody is turning on and off the camera, and it's like being in and out of the room. Think about it for a second. Make sure you keep your camera either open or off, on or off, until the speaker has finished. If you're outside the room, you wait until the speaker has finished, right? And then you come in. That makes sense? Now, how do you ensure that that happens in your club? If you're an officer, have rules for online engagement in advance. And when you sign up a new member, make sure they have orientation and it's part of their assimilation process to the club. That first meeting that they have with the VPE, here are the rules. We expect you to be camera ready. We're going to see a little bit more of that in a moment. And we're expecting you to be present, and being present is being here. Now, if you had technical difficulties and your camera is not working, let us know. Otherwise, in my online clubs meetings, I expect everybody to have their cameras ready and open. And no interruptions, except when there's what we call a pool, point of order, right? And we need to offer support to all speakers, evaluators, table topics, etc. Now, one thing is to be honest with individuals, and another is to be rude to individuals. Make sure that even though when you need to be honest, because we promise integrity, we need to be kind, because we're talking with human beings here. And there's nothing more important than that human being that you have in front of you. So let's make sure that we do that with a positive mindset. And we need to avoid that personal criticism. I always say, let's assume positive intent, because not every day people have a good day. And sometimes people have different personalities. That's okay. One thing that Toastmasters had taught me is a lot of patience with personalities that I not necessarily agree, but I love my club and I will deal with it no matter what, right? And by the way, you learn to even love them in time. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the lectern etiquette, even if it's online. First, to create that pleasant ambience, we need to follow a couple of rules here. We need to be speaking to the audience, even if it's online. And the primary eye contact is not with, let's say if we're in person, with the speaker that is coming or like that while we're talking, is with the audience until you have named the person for the final time and that person is next to you and you're ready then to lead the applause from the beginning. Once you have done that, you are supposed to be applauding until the person reaches the lectern. And we forget that all the time. We don't do it online. And I encourage people to use the hand clapping reaction button in your Zoom, if you're using Zoom, and make sure that you're clapping hands too, or you're doing the sign language gesture, right? Until the person commences their speech. Now, is the person who does the introduction the one that leads the applause? Because that's the person that others are going to be imitating. If we are in person, we shake hands at the lectern, right? We always say that baby is not to be leave alone. If you have hybrid and the person, one of the person is speaking, is going to speak, the Toastmaster should remain on the lectern while the speaker is speaking online. And that's important because we don't leave that baby alone. Sometimes you sit down and the Toastmaster sits down and then the person finishes and now you have to wait until the Toastmaster person comes back to the lectern. No, stay at the lectern, let them finish the speech. Now, I would advise if the speech is 22 minutes, pull a chair because you probably get tired of be standing. Okay. And by the way, we don't go across, we do not cross in front or behind the speaker. We just leave from the side when we shake hands. Does that make sense at all? That's part of the etiquette. It's like eating with the knife and the fork properly and those kind of things, right? That's a proper way of doing things. And then we need to continue showing interest and involvement throughout the speech presentation, especially if you're remaining in view of the audience. If you are the Toastmaster and one of the speakers is online, as I explained before, in that hybrid environment, you need to participate and show that you're actively listening that individual. Remember, you are a role model. Now, these are the kind of things we don't talk in Toastmaster too often, right? What about when the meeting is just virtual? We should arrive a little bit early. In keynotes, we have an advanced club called Keynotes. For those of you who don't know, I welcome you to visit. And we open like 15 minutes before the meeting. Why? Because we want to give that environment of camaraderie and talking about anything that people want, just like we would do in person. And we have those 15 minutes to talk about just anything we want. And then we start on time, our meeting. That also enables people to be always on time for your meetings. Now, be camera ready and be present as if you would in person. I mentioned that already. So it's very, very important because if I am in person and I'm online and I'm looking down here, unless I'm doing an evaluation, obviously, but I am entertained, pushing my cat or my dog or whatever. I mean, I love dogs and cats, but let's be real. I had seen too many already in Zoom, and not always is fun. It's most especially when people are having a speech. The camera and the microphone, they need to be clear, right? And sometimes they don't even clean the screen of the camera and you just see the person all fuzzy or the voice is not coming. And those devices now are very cheap. They're coming in all types of prices. You don't need the super expensive equipment, but if you're going to be online, invest a little bit on your technology. Of course, if you're not talking, mute yourself. And the backgrounds, for God's sake, I had seen them all, from pillows to big sofas to everything, okay? Now, another thing is, when you have an in-person meeting, you should not be talking to the person on the side and making comments and being distracted, right? If you are online, you should not be chatting all the time with other people online because it's the same thing. It's like talking to other people. And also we need to make sure that we are training our members, if we're doing online, to use the raise the hand protocol, making sure that, hey, if anybody wants to talk, raise your hand, because how difficult it is when there are 4 people talking at the same time online and you don't even know who was it. is very difficult to understand. So let's make sure we use that protocol. And sometimes, no matter how much you plan, how much you put your dog outside or your cat, and you close your door and all of that, the door, somebody's knocking on your door and there's nobody else in the house and you had to take care of that emergency. And the other day I forgot to turn off my stove, and I had to, I'm in the middle of somebody speaking and I'm remembering, and I'm started to feel like the smell, something is burning. And with the minimum disruption, I turned off my camera and I went and did what I had to do. But make sure those are the exceptions, not the rule. Does that make sense? We will have emergencies, that's for sure. I'm gonna give you a big tip here. Some people don't remember the cable that used to connect with the Wi-Fi, with your tower on the Wi-Fi and your computer. And when you do want a very, very, very good connection, I have a super system in my house with 3-4 screens and whatever. But I make sure that when I'm going to do a presentation, I connect to the Ethernet with the cable, because that will diminish the opportunity of freezing the video or the voice coming out of, miscues and stuff like that. So very important that you, if you're the one doing a presentation, if you're in a speech contest, for example, use your cable. It's a very good practice. So everybody knows what the Ethernet cable is. And in the old days, you didn't have the Wi-Fi wireless. You had to connect with that long cable. I still do. Now, you need to know your platform. And it's always advisable, just like today, I have DJ helping me there, have a Zoom master role in your clubs if you're doing online or hybrid. That should be a role that could be rotated if you have more than one person skill on that. And if not, 1 or 2 people, because you should not depend on only one person. I was working with a club once as a coach, and they only had one person. Guess what? When that person couldn't make it, we had to meet online only because there was nobody else that can do it. Is that making sense at all? Okay. Review and reward your in-person content to make it effective. What I mean by that is the scripts that we use, the guest packages. If you're hybrid today, you have to add new language to it. That's just good etiquette. You're helping the person understand better, right? And you have to have it online as you have to have it physical, because it depends where the guest is going to show up. And sometimes we don't think about that. We're just taking the name and then we're sending an email. Once that person, you know what is the life shelf? I mean, the shelf life, I'm sorry, we call it shelf life, is like how long that lead or that prospect will be interested. Once they do a visit, less than 48 hours. If you don't engage the visitor immediately, your chances to lose that person as a possible member are going to be higher as the days goes by. If you have a guest package online and you put it there and ask them to download and ask them, when can I call you for a follow-up? It's going to be a lot easier for you to capture those guests as members. Although this is not a membership session, it's just a tip. Have functionality roles, scripts, and files available. Sometimes your timer or your grammarian is going to be online, and this is more for, obviously, the virtual world. And everybody say their own version. You want that to be standard because you want your guests to always have the best of the best experience, and your members too. Make sure that you follow that protocol. It's part of our etiquette that everybody say and describe their function for that day. use the scripts. They're all online and you can save them. And if the person is going to do virtual, then you can put it on the chat and they can read it from there. That's another good practice for the hybrid environment as well, or virtual only. Then consider delivering supplementary information in handouts. If, for example, as an officer, you need to remind people that TLI, the Smedley membership drive, right? The whatever events that we might have on the district, put it in one handout and drop it in the chat. That's another way of helping people get the information, download it, and have it on their hands a lot quicker than emailing. People these days are not reading emails too much. But if you have that opportunity, do it. And if you have it in people in person as well, deliver that by hand. Provide clear guidelines on how to engage, and this is more in the virtual world, and using reaction. If you notice, the DJ has been putting faces and reactions, just take a minute, an education moment in your club, and cover these little things. We can use those educational moments to just understand better how to use the platform. How do you share? How do you put the PowerPoint on? How do you use your other applications there? The other day, I was in a meeting with the training academy with Maria, and I was teaching people how to use the whiteboards, which is a lot of fun too. When you have your officers meeting, you can use your whiteboard to do brainstorming and things like that. Not difficult to do. You just need to watch the video and you're going to come across as an expert. I wasn't, I just watched the video. But also remember what is allowed and what is not allowed. So when you do those rules of engagements with your members, so you know there's certain emoticons that are not fun and that should not be used. Make sure you ban those as well. And you say emoticons that are not appropriate are la 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 la. And when you're doing your orientation with your new members, say it. Because we don't want to create the wrong environment. Does that make sense? Here are some examples of possible guidelines that you can do for hybrid meetings. And I put this on etiquette because it is like the protocols of when I think about etiquette, I think about protocol, things that we should do in certain ways. And before we start the meeting, for example, it is important to provide guidelines for everyone. And some examples are attendees should mute their microphone when not speaking. Well, you said, Edith, that's normal. Yeah, but some people forget. And at that moment when you say it, they remember. Attendees should wait until they are acknowledged before speaking. Don't jump when somebody's talking and interrupting the president with a question. I have a question for you. No, raise your hand and wait until you are acknowledged, right? They should limit the speaking time. I visited a club not long ago, and I was perplexed about the grammarian report. It took 7.5 minutes. That's a speech. That's a speech. She recapped the entire meeting, word by word almost, of all these different things. And the least I heard was, what was the word of the day, who used it, what was proper language and what was not proper language. But I heard a lot about what she liked and disliked about every person who spoke at the lectern. And I was like, oh my God, make sure you're timing your functionaries as well. And that's a very good practice. Because if you want to start on time and finish on time, those functionaries have no more than 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes to do the reports. I mean, how much our counter should take in giving a report? Should not be more than 2 minutes, I think. The host reserves the right to mute attendees as needed. I tell them in advance. Now, this is one of my favorite. She's from my club in Hunters Creek, Pilar. And she always finished her guidelines with smile, you're in camera. And that sets the tone for everybody to give us a big smile and begin the meeting. She was the sergeant at arms. And that was her favorite, her phrase at the end after doing the guidelines. After the meeting, now I will let here, DJ, can you read that for us? Another nice quote.
Absolutely. The well-balanced, intelligent speaker is the natural leader in any group of which he is a part.
Very good. And I love that quote. I love that quote because it reminds us that we're Toastmaster everywhere we go. It's not just in the meeting. And that our etiquette and our role modeling carries on with us in other places. I have recognized Toastmasters in other environments, even though I didn't meet them in Toastmasters, just because of the way they spoke or something that they had said that I know is a Toastmaster, how you say, tribe kind of language, okay? And one of the things that we should do when the meeting is over, if you're meeting online, don't close just right away, unless you're one of those corporate clubs that they really need to finish on time and whatever. But if you have few minutes, adjourn the meeting and leave the Zoom open, because on that way, they can, say their goodbyes or ask a question that they can ask when it's just like you would be in person, right? So you want to provide your experience as close as in person as possible. And if you are in a hybrid environment, you can offer help, as needed in cleaning up or whatever. But the most important for me is reflecting on what you learned that day. What was that you took away from the meeting, and how that learning will be applicable to something that you're going through or to something that you're about to do? Is it changing any goals? Is it affecting you, or is it something that can you improve in something that you're doing? That reflective moment is very, very important after the meeting, because otherwise, I carry with me my notebook of Toastmasters everywhere over here so we can be seen. And it's almost like every year I had to buy a new one, because I'm always taking notes on the meetings. I'm always making sure that I learn a little bit more, and I'm always ready to do an evaluation for someone that I missed that I had to evaluate. And I have a witness to that. And if you're going to share your thoughts, maybe you saw something that you didn't like, I will invite you to do that in a way that is constructive, not critical, not ugly. Never speak ill of any of your members in your club or any other club for that reason, okay? Let's make sure that we are called as leader to build one another, even if we don't like the individual, even if we might not necessarily connect with the personality, we still a fellow Toastmaster. We call each other fellow Toastmasters for a reason. Okay, so in wrapping, in successful club meetings, the meeting begins and ends on time. All meeting participants arrive on time and are prepared. Members and guests alike are greeted as they arrive, helping them feel welcome. And the program is fast-paced, interesting, and fun. And that only happens when your agenda is full before the meeting, right? If you start the first 3 or 5 minutes of the meeting just, okay, we don't have our counter, or we don't have a timer, or we don't, that takes away a lot of that experience. And transition between segments is smooth. So we need to prepare people for the roles. This past Saturday, one of the members was first Toastmaster for the first time, and guess what? We had to train her first so she can do a good job, and she did fantastic. All members are present and have an opportunity to participate. Evaluations are helpful, constructive, and contribute to members' personal growth and improvement. And we recognize members' achievements. Make sure we do that. Energy is all. If you are coming with the energy low, everybody's going to be low. So the question is what energy you bring to the table. Now, don't forget that Toastmasters is where leaders are made. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. And I am open to any questions. Or comments, for that matter.
I don't have a question. I just like the way you presented it today. It was very nicely presented with a lot of information, some things that we don't do or we know about, but just information that we should be abreast of it and be available at all times. So I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if anybody's interested in the PowerPoint, although I read a statistic that when people ask for PowerPoint, less than 15% of the times they open it. But this meeting was recorded. And if you need the PowerPoint, just leave me your email in the chat and I will make sure you receive it. This is the kind of things that you probably want to discuss with your clubs, right? Sometimes we come to the meetings, we learn things. And I don't think I said anything new because basically what we recap probably had to do more with the idea of what we sign up for as Toastmasters, as the keynote was saying. But at the end of the day, when everything changed with hybrid, a lot of things we forgot. Nora, you have a question.
I'm in a division that has two sites. A lot of new members and a lot of old members. There's no in between. And one of the things that I see that is impacting the culture is that the old members that knew the in-person before COVID culture. So in some kind of way, they act like they own the division or the club, and they are not that open to, if I say something like you have said, like this is not the way to evaluate, or don't be rude, or don't be so possessive or criticism. How can I deal with DTMs, experienced members that has a lot of time in Toastmasters and they think they know what they are doing, but they are affecting the new members and the culture of the meetings?
It's a change management process, and I will make this short because we're over the time. But here is one trick that I have for you. Bring a panel from other district.
Oh.
Because not everybody's a prophet in their own land. Invite people from other areas, or, for example, one of these speakers today immediate past international president, and put a panel together and make sure that those individuals are coming because they were here, and you prepare the speakers for the change. We have to go.
Yes, we have a few seconds left. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Edith. Fantastic. The session evaluation jot form is in the chat. Please take a moment to fill that out and share your thoughts on today's presentation. We appreciate each and every one of you, Judy, Julie, Kathy, Nora, Earl, Claudia. Did I miss any? Lori. And I did take any emails that would like a copy of the PowerPoint for Edith, so she will send that out for you.
Thank you.
Please send it to me.
Nora, we got it.
Yes.
Share
I'm
your
gonna
email.
use it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.